Hello and welcome to Tidy. I'm Deepkanya, and joining me on this webinar today is Kiran Menon, who is CEO and co-founder of Tidy. Thank you so much, Kiran, for joining us.
Thanks, Debbie. Looking forward to this one.
Yes, I am too, actually, because this is a topic that we've discussed briefly, on and off over the years, and I know onboarding by itself is something we both care deeply about, and it's pretty fascinating to think about the things that can be achieved when onboarding is done right. The scope of onboarding itself is so immense. Which is why I think this topic in particular is something I'm really looking forward to unpacking. Is how can onboarding create a level playing field, right?
Yep.
So before I jump into it, let me throw to you, Kiran, and ask you, what according to you, is a level playing field? What does it look like?
I think, there are multiple ways in which disparities kind of come into processes within an organization. And I think the fundamental problem has always been that as you start scaling, it becomes almost impossible for you to create a standardized process. And a standardized process which doesn't necessarily keep it cookie cutter either, right? So everyone needs to have a personalized experience, but it still needs to be standardized across multiple locations, across multiple departments, across multiple types of people that you're hiring. So I think, creating a level playing field has been something that everyone's been looking for the answer to. But I'm actually looking forward to what you have to say about this.
I know, and that's why we're here today, because when we talk about a level playing field, usually, this is the definition of a level playing field in anywhere outside of the workplace is a state in which conditions in a competition or a situation are fair for everyone. But when you translate that to the workplace, it's where everyone has the same opportunities to grow, to thrive, to succeed, right? And this can be very different for a lot of different people. It could mean a different thing for different people who come from different backgrounds, right? The whole concept of equity in the workplace has long been discussed and established in the HR space. But it's interesting to see how we have moved from creating workplaces free of discrimination to actually creating workplaces that are inclusive, because there is a difference between those two things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what is interesting for us. And today we're just going to go a little deeper into this and to figure out how onboarding can play that role towards creating this equitable environment at the workplace. Yeah. So you have to start somewhere. So where do you start, right? And if we go on to the next bit, there are some questions that everyone, as an organization and as HR or as a leader, you have to ask yourself, right? DEI is very much in the spotlight more and more now that we have hybrid workplaces, we have remote work. So a company first needs to define what is their attitude towards DEI. Where do you stand, right? What is your policy, therefore, going to be? And I think some of the other questions that you have to then ask during this process of self-discovery is, what are those biases that you have to tackle first, right? You have your explicit or overt biases, right? What does your company look like right now? What is it? Is it a diverse enough talent pool? How are you recruiting? Where are you recruiting from? What kind of colleges are you reaching out to when you're recruiting freshers, for example? And then you have implicit biases, right? How do you promote within the organization? My favorite, and in fact, something that I feel personally, very strongly about, is affinity bias. We all have it. We don't realize it, but we always veer towards people who are more like us, who speak like us, who come from similar backgrounds, and that ends up creating a clique within the workplace. So how do you break that out? How do you break out of that? And how do you then also stop yourself from creating these echo chambers? Because we will, if you hire from the same kind of background, same kind of challenges, you are going to create an echo chamber, right? And that's not what an inclusive workplace needs to look like.
So where do these biases come from, do you think, to start? Because if you're thinking about a level playing field, now, are the biases more from a recruiter perspective or a hiring manager perspective, or Is it inbuilt into the culture of the organization as a whole? So everyone, all 100,000 employees will basically have a similar bias. What is the kind of source?
I think in the case of, large organizations or even, small and medium-sized ones, it is usually top down. It has to begin from leadership. It has to begin from, say, your board, right? Where do they stand? What is their attitude towards, what kind of a workplace you want to create, right? Because it's your responsibility at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
it begins there. Which is why it's important that these policies are set in place by leadership right at the start, so that you are acknowledging that there are biases in the workplace. There's some can be helped, some can't, and then what do you do about it? I think that's the thing, and this will then automatically go on to impact everything that you do. Once you know where you stand, it will impact how you recruit. Like I said, right, what does your job description look like? Your recruitment team, have you conveyed your message on DEI to your recruitment team, so that when they're creating that JD, they are keeping that in mind? What is it available in languages, if that's what your aim is? What's your interview process looking like, right? What kind of questions are you asking during that process? Then even how you design your benefits. Is it a generic one size fit all, or are you keeping in mind that you have a diverse talent pool that has requirements and needs that are very different from yours, right? Your L&D initiatives and your entire company culture. And I'm sure there are lots of other things that this will filter down to, but starting here is, I think, an extremely important first step towards creating that.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
As a hiring manager yourself, you said affinity bias is something that you're particularly kind of not fond of,
mindful
but
of,
particularly,
yes.
Particularly aware of. So what do you do? What are a couple of the things? Because again, from a company culture perspective, maybe the company says, hey, we don't want any biases, but as individuals, all of us still have it, right? Irrespective of what the company says or does or has policies for. So how do you kind of look at bias in your hiring process?
That's a very, very good question. And it's something that we all have to kind of keep asking ourselves and reflecting on. So, for example, I would say that, try to look at different cities within, I am in India right now. So I would look at, say, tier 2, tier 3 cities, people from a different educational background, people who don't necessarily have the kind of work experience or professional journey that I have, because that's the only way, especially in a field like marketing, that's the only way I can get different ideas. I can be challenged on my own thoughts. Right. So, I think it comes down to that again. How do I write my JD? What kind of, where am I putting it out? Where am I, looking for people? What am I saying during the interview process? Language is such an important part of our, culture and our who we are. So are you, because someone speaks a little differently than you, is that something that you're considering when you're hiring that person? I think these are all things that I try to keep in mind, when I'm doing it myself personally.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah. So, and that brings us to the topic that we are trying to unpack today, which is onboarding, right? So you will have all your policies in place. You'll have, everything written down, and your recruitment is going great. You have recruited from a diverse talent pool, but then onboarding is when it actually gets implemented. This is when it gets cemented. All the work that you've done, this is when you roll it out and see it coming alive, right? In fact, like, it says, building an inclusive onboarding experience is the first step towards creating an inclusive workplace and company culture, right? There are enough and more stats out there which will tell you that a new hire will probably decide whether or not they want to stick around in your organization within the first 3 to 6 months of joining, right? And this is all the more true today in a hybrid environment, in a remote environment where you do not have a workplace where you can all gather together, right? You are in your own space. So it has to begin at the very beginning. This creating this transparent onboarding culture, so to speak, and then what you deliver to people, right? You as well, Kiran, you've seen this throughout. You've been doing this for so long, where you've been talking to our customers and helping them design the perfect onboarding experience. Do you find that, this has been something that people have come to you with in terms of it being a challenge at all?
It definitely is. I think the first, and alluding back to what I was saying earlier, probably at the beginning of this chat, is the first problem is always how do you standardize the onboarding experience, right? Because fundamentally, when you have a process which is fragmented in multiple, deployed and managed in various ways across the organization, that itself translates to a very, very poor experience, because everyone's going to get bits and pieces right. Everyone's going to get bits and pieces wrong. And so I think the first step is always standardizing the process as much as possible. The other thing that we keep kind of hearing, I keep talking to, various CHROs, various executives across the globe, and to a large extent, automation is also seen as a way to remove bias.
Yes.
Because you're not necessarily creating human bias when something is automated, because the system is taking care of things, the system is managing things. But I think often what is misunderstood is that automation is the key for a humanless experience. But I think when it comes to onboarding, it is super critical to look at automation as an enabler for a better relationship, rather than eliminating the human experience. So I think that's something that we keep hearing about, and I keep talking to all the execs saying that, hey, if you think sticking a piece of software is going to solve all your problems, it'll solve a lot of it, which is the automation part, taking out the biases, but then you can't let go of the human interaction. You need to be able to use the data that's coming out of this automation to build a better relationship with your new hires, no matter where they are, whether it's a manager and the new hire, whether it's the recruiter and the new hire, the HRBP and the new hire, buddy and the new hire. So I think that's where you really start building an inclusive experience when you start looking at it from both those levels.
Right, absolutely. I mean, and I think what you said there was where you standardize the process, so everyone is getting the same kind of experience, but also then how do you use the data that you have now? HR has access to data like never before. So how are you using that data to really create personalized experiences for your new hires? Because that's where you identify, okay, so and so comes from this kind of a background, has very specific challenges, has very specific needs, has very specific ambitions. So how do you then build that into the experience? Because I think acknowledgement is the first, again, very important part of creating inclusion. So I think that's why onboarding is such an important stage, to ensure that you're creating that level playing field. And I think so what I've tried to do today is actually encapsulate all those things, like create like a checklist of sorts for managers who will be might be watching this, to kind of figure that what are the few things that I need to get right, absolutely right, to get started on this path. And I think it's the crux of it is all ensuring access, right? Access is the key to inclusion. I'll quickly get into the first most important bit is access to knowledge and information. Now, outside of the workplace, you would normally say that, it's access to education, which is, the great leveler. Yeah, because if you have access to education, you can do anything. Similarly, I think that applies to within the workplace as well, where you have to provide the same kind of information without any assumptions and biases of your own to everyone, to every new hire. Don't you so for example, if you started thinking about how your benefits, for example, we touched upon that briefly before, how do you surface that information most relevant? And I know you have some real world examples from the way our customers have been deploying onboarding.
So I think and again, it's access which is combined with enablement, right, which is what you were talking about. So the idea is, one level is to give the information, but then also to enable the person to kind of act on it, rather than just, being a passive source of communication and information. So I think, what we've seen some of our customers doing is really breaking down and using data that they already have, which in the past was just, used for filing and storing, but now actively using that data, you know a lot about me as a company. Therefore, how can you deliver a better level of service? So knowledge is not equal for everyone.
Yeah.
Each person requires different types of information, right, at different points of time. And so I think that's what a lot of our customers have tried to do with our deployments, where maybe I'm a father who has a 1-year-old child, and I may never go through that 40-page, benefits document. But what if the company could tell me, hey, Kiran, these are the 3 most important benefits for you when you join this organization. By the way, one of them is a daycare service where your 1-year-old gets a full day of learning and, an enhanced experience at our dime. So you don't need to care about that, right? So suddenly I start feeling like the company is talking just to me.
Yeah.
And that knowledge and information is just for me. It's not a cookie cutter process. It's not, random pieces of information that are from social media that I'm getting about the company. It's really the company starts talking about me. And I think that's when access to knowledge and information really shines through.
Yeah. Yep. I think the other amazing example I can, again, so relevant in our world today where we are all hybrid. You don't see the people you hired for months. They will
Yep.
start work, they'll be with you for 6 months, and then maybe you have an offsite or maybe you have a meeting where everyone comes together again. And that's probably going to continue. That's going to be the reality for all of us. So then if you're hiring for diversity, and how do you ensure that everyone's on the same level, wherein you can't make assumptions about the kind of tools this person is used to using. You cannot make assumptions that, oh, so and so will have a laptop already.
Yeah.
Or is comfortable using an onboarding tool, is comfortable answering survey questions on their phones, right? You cannot make any of these assumptions. Therefore, maybe solving for that, being mindful, again, acknowledging that we have people from different backgrounds, and then building the experience on that is the first step towards providing the right amount of knowledge, providing information so they can, feel like they belong. They don't feel like they're on the back foot from before day one.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, that then brings us to this, I think. And here I'd like to actually start with a personal experience, which is, when I started working at Tidy, this was in April of 2020, smack in the middle of the pandemic, with 2 little kids at home with no help. It was really hard for many, many, many working parents. And, everyone had their own challenges during that time. And I remember I spoke to you about, how I was struggling with not being able, because I came from a more, a different kind of work environment where I was expected to log in at a particular time. And then we spoke about that and it was like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And, you as a parent completely got it. And I think that really took the pressure off and helped me feel a little less guilty about the fact that I wasn't online at like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and that I could take time off in the middle to go make lunch and do all of those things. I think that, again, that information that HR has today or can get, or leaders or managers can get, and then acknowledging that helps your employees be seen and be heard. And then seeing that translate into real action by the company makes you feel appreciated. And then, you're buying my loyalty in a very simple way by just acknowledging that, I see you, I know you've got issues, and I'll help you out. I'll give you the support you need. So I think that's where this comes in.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, just adding on top of it, I think from my experience, it's this data that's available, even if it's contextual. The next step is fundamentally helping people understand how they can use it, right? Because again, you will give them contextual data. Like you said, hey, I knew you were a parent, I was a parent, I felt the pain and we kind of could work it out. But when you kind of explode it into a large organization scenario, I think a lot of work also has to go into change management within the organization. So helping managers understand how they can use the data that's now available to them to create that better relationship. We talked earlier about the fact that data could build better relationships, but I think there's a step in between, which is once that data is available, how do you train or help your executives use that data to build better relationships and to be there so that they can see and hear their team,
Absolutely.
right? Because again, that's something that automation cannot do. That's something technology cannot do. It is something that has to happen on a human level. Because if a chatbot told you, hey, I know you have a kid, please log in at 9:45, that's okay. That's not going to work, right? So it needs to be more of a human interaction where data is being sent to individuals, and then they're trained to learn how to use that data and then have a better relationship with the individual.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I would like to take that a step further as well and say that, while you're giving agency to, say, managers and leaders to be able to make that decision that, okay, I need to provide this support, you also have to keep in mind that since you're hiring from a diverse pool, there are going to be people who belong to underrepresented communities. And how do you empower them? Because it doesn't come naturally to everybody to reach out and say, I have this problem and how do I solve it? So then enabling that as well, I think, is extremely powerful. And they need to know that during the onboarding and even before, the pre-boarding phase, that your voice matters, and we'll take that on board. And this is always going to be an iterative process. We're trying to make a better place at work for you, right? So I think that also kind of really builds into that experience that a company is willing to deliver. And then, of course, it brings us to access to a community, right? Again, I will say it again, work has changed. We are hybrid, we are remote. You do not have the ability to, peek across somebody's cubicle wall and say, I'm getting stuck here, help me out. Or, go and speak to somebody who, maybe reminds you of yourself. You do not have the ability to reach out. So how do you, seek help? Yeah. So I think that building that community, simple things like during the onboarding process, you can have people in cohorts, right? Okay, this is the batch of so-and-so, you guys, so and you have to get to know each other. You have to be able to reach out to each other, have the agency to reach out to each other and seek help. And I think that's where that buddy system also plays an important role. Mm-hmm. In fact, we did this survey last year. It's called the Onboarding Out of Office Report, where we actually found that, very few employees actually had a buddy assigned to them during their onboarding period, which is shocking. Because that means, and especially if you're working from home or remotely, you are pretty much on your own. You to figure things out. So you can either choose, if you're a self-motivated go-getter, you can swim, or you can just sink and walk out the door, right? And that's the real danger that we have, and we're all looking for this, right? This connection at the workplace.
Yeah, 100%. I think we have a lot of customers where a lot of their focus, rightly so, during that first 3 months is to try and build communities and interest groups who kind of have the same sort of experience, have the same sort of interests, have the same sort of background, because you can actually slice and dice the communities in multiple ways, right? It could be, and it's not just about career. It's not just about, hey, I want to be a data scientist, so I want to hang out with other data scientists. It can be about, even things that kind of help support your work life or your personal life. So definitely kind of giving individuals access to this group and this sort of community building is super critical for onboarding as a whole. Yeah.
And then, of course, it comes to the magic word opportunity. Right? Everyone is looking for opportunity to grow, to be better versions perhaps of themselves, to thrive, the opportunity to belong in a workplace. I think this is where transparency plays a huge role, and how a company and how leadership actually communicates this to their new hires can also, be that one thing that makes that person want to stick around and stay because they see a future in the company. So, for example, and I know you worked with our customers and you keep pushing them towards designing their onboarding experience to keep this particular piece in mind, wherein, like you said, what are your hopes and dreams? What do you hope to do in another 6 months, right? Do you want to grow your skills in a completely different direction,
Yeah.
from what you are doing? What is transitioning within the workplace look like, right? Are there opportunities outside? And especially in enterprises, right, we have that, for example, global mobility is a big thing that you need to communicate at the get-go.
Yeah. So I think, what very often I think opportunity was seen as a probably single dimensional kind of thing. But I think enterprises have now kind of expanded that horizon, right? Like you said, global mobility is an opportunity for you to experience something new through work.
Yeah.
Many people join companies with the hope of traveling abroad, traveling to a different country and working over there. And actually providing an opportunity like that is very often life-changing for a lot of people, right? So it could be, working in a different country, working in a different environment, working in a different department or a different function, moving within the organization. And I think why this becomes critical from an onboarding perspective is that you need to give the individual an overview of what's possible. Once you kind of join this company, what is possible within the context of this company for you as an individual? And it will be very different. Maybe 7, 8 years ago in my career, I would have loved joining a company which gave me the opportunity to travel and go into, multiple countries and work over there. But today, with 2 kids and a very different lifestyle, maybe that doesn't become important. And so even at the time of onboarding, all of that data that you're capturing about the individual starts becoming important for you to start planning with the individual about what they want and what they want to see as opportunities as well, right? So that same opportunity has a very different context at 2 different points of my life. Yeah. And I think it's very important for companies to start recognizing that as well, because again, cookie cutter does not work. And during the onboarding stage, if you go in with just one single kind of one dimension sort of onboarding, it'll no longer work as well.
Absolutely. And if you in fact take it out of, expand on that further, opportunity also, for example, if you are, say, young and single and you've started work in this massive enterprise, opportunity comes to you in a very different way as well, right? There are informal ways in which you come across opportunity. For example, it could be after hours drinks with the team, with your managers, where you have access to all these people. But if you are, for example, a single parent, that is not a luxury that you might have. Then how do you ensure that everyone is getting that opportunity regardless of who you get to hobnob with? And that's a tough one to kind of figure, but I think a lot of companies are doing it well by creating these informal cohorts within the workplace during working hours, where they create groups. And that brings us to the next point, which is again access to mentors and coaches, right? Like I said, like if you are okay to go out and hang out with your team, with senior leadership post work, great. And that's how you build networks. But what do you do? For example, this is especially true for a lot of women who do not do that or are not comfortable doing that. And that's coming from a cultural perspective, right? So then how do you ensure that she has as much access to those mentors, as much access to leadership, as much access to people who would be her coaches, guiding her, showing her the ropes, helping her navigate the workplace? I think that again is crucial to you succeeding and actually belonging in a workplace.
Yeah. I think one common kind of theme across all of these points, right, is and what kind of came top of mind for me is that onboarding therefore becomes that process or that moment where you're trying to understand as much as you can about the individual. As an organization, you're trying to understand as much as you can about the individual, and then you're kind of using that learning and updating yourself over a period of time as the individual also kind of goes through their employee life cycle, and then using that data, using that understanding to deliver a better experience from an organization perspective, right? So whether it was for opportunities, whether it was mentoring, whether it was for knowledge and information, it's always about how do you use the data that you've captured? How do you get more information that can be useful for you in delivering a better service quality to
Yeah.
the individual?
Yeah, and it is becoming that, right? It is about the service that you can give to your employees, to your people, because ultimately that's what you have. Again, I want to throw back to the onboarding out of office report. In fact, that's available on our website. If you go to www.tidy.co and look for the onboarding out of office report, only 54% of our new hires, and I'm quoting here, had access, for example, to their managers during their first few weeks in a new company. And that again, is telling, because if you do not have access to the person you're reporting to as a new hire, some might, again, personality, they're extroverts, they'll go out and get the information they need, get the help they need. But, there are others who will not be able to do so. So how do you preempt and proactively create an environment where they have access and can reach out? I think that is the magic sauce that makes onboarding, truly work for people from different backgrounds.
Great.
So I think, these are to sum up, right? So 5 things, which I think every HR leader, manager, people manager should tick off to ensure that onboarding does create that level playing field, does create a more inclusive workplace. Is this access to knowledge and information, to being seen, being heard, to community and peers, to opportunity, to mentors and coaches. And I'm sure there must be many other things that we have not covered today. And which is why I would like to throw it open to anybody who's watching, that, please let us know if we've missed something, write to us. Tell us if, whether you identify with any of these, whether you think there's been a glaring error in missing what access looks like to you and what a level playing field looks like to you. Kiran, any closing thoughts on the future and how you see, because I know you speak to customers and they tell you their vision and what they're hoping to achieve, with Tidy. What do you feel the future looks like?
I think, we're seeing a lot of companies understand the need for technology consolidation. Mm-hmm. And the primary reason, when you kind of, peel back the onion, is fundamentally to deliver a better experience. That's, the problem statement always. Mm-hmm. But when you start kind of going further down and digging a little bit deeper, you start seeing that a lot of it starts with the onboarding process. And so a lot of the companies today are starting to understand that. Their problem, which is, maybe first year attrition, is directly translated to their onboarding process, or the lack of a good onboarding process. The fact that they're not able to retain good talent and build them from a career perspective translates to an onboarding problem. So everything that you're looking at from an employee lifecycle perspective literally starts with onboarding, right? So you really need to pay a lot of attention to how you're kind of running your onboarding program. And I think a lot of what was covered over here, these 5 points, for example, does not allude to just day one. It alludes to time which is before day one and your relationship with the individual, and also, post day one, obviously. But I think that's what's starting to happen. More and more enterprises, more and more companies are starting to understand that. And so I think it's going to be exciting time for onboarding in general over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really enjoyed discussing this with you. And if there are any other topics, we'd love to hear, from you. Let us know what you'd like us to discuss, debate, unpack, because the world of work is evolving constantly. And I think we are all striving towards, that one thing where we can make work a better place. So this is where you can find us. These are our coordinates. You can visit us on www.tidy.co, or you can write to us at media@tidy.it, or to me personally at dipkanya@tidy.it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Kiran.